You know, for decades, the 4% rule has been the golden rule of retirement. But what if I told you it's not just outdated? What if it's actually costing you money? Yeah, we're going to dig into the numbers and see if there's a smarter way to plan for your future.
You know, this whole thing actually kicked off because of a fantastic question from one of you, Bob C. He asked, isn't the 4% rule a bit antiquated? Does it still matter? And Bob, that question it's perfect. It really gets right to the heart of how much retirement planning has changed.
All right, so before we can talk about where we're going, we really need to get on the same page about where we've been. So let's do a quick refresher on the classic 4% rule.
The whole idea is, well, it's beautifully simple, right? You take your nest egg, let's say it's $1 million. You pull out 4%, so that's $40,000 in year one. Then every single year after that, you just take out that same amount plus a little extra for inflation. That's it. This is what we call a fixed withdrawal strategy, or FWS for short. And you can see the appeal, right? It's a predictable, stable paycheck year in and year out. But, and this is the big but, this is what gets people like Bob asking those great questions. The problem is, it's so conservative that you often end up with a huge pile of money after 30 years. Money you could have been spending and enjoying all along.
Okay, so if that fixed strategy is just too rigid, what else is there? Well, this is where things get really interesting.
So let's meet the challengers. First up, you've got the percent of portfolio strategy. We'll call it PPS. Instead of a fixed dollar amount, you just take a fixed percentage, say 5%, of whatever your portfolio is worth that year. So if the market's up, you spend more. Simple. Then there's the variable withdrawal strategy, or VWS. Now this one's even more dynamic. It lets your paycheck go up and down with your investment returns. But, and this is key, it has some safety rails built in.
Okay, so FWS, PPS, VWS. It sounds like three totally different ways of thinking, right? One's super rigid, the others are flexible. But what if I told you they're not really different at all? That they're basically just three settings on the exact same machine. And this really breaks it down perfectly. Look, every single strategy starts at step 1. You pick your withdrawal rate. Then, step 2, you decide if that amount can change over time. The old school 4% rule, the FWS, just says nope and stops right there. End of story. But the other two, PPS and VWS, they say yep, and they just add one more step. Step 3, where you set the rules for how it changes. See? They're all part of the same family.
Okay, so they're all related. But how do they actually stack up against each other in the real world? Let's run the numbers and find out.
To do this, we're going to use something called a Monte Carlo simulation. It sounds fancy, but it's really just a computer model that lets us simulate hundreds of different possible futures for the stock market. We're going to run 500 different 30-year retirements, all starting with a cool $1 million. This will show us the whole spectrum of what could happen. And just to keep things fair, we're going to start all three strategies with a 5% withdrawal rate.
All right, first up to bat, the classic, the fixed withdrawal strategy. We're taking out 50 grand in year one and just adjusting for inflation after that. Let's see how it does.
Let's break down these results. On the left, that's your portfolio balance over 30 years for all 500 simulations. See those 8 red lines at the very bottom? Those are the failures, the times where the money ran out completely. Now, look over to the right. That's your income. It's a perfectly flat line at $50,000. Predictable, right? But here's the kicker. Look back at the left chart. See that massive spread in how much money is left over? So many of these simulations end with millions of dollars still in the bank.
All right, contender number 2, the percent of portfolio strategy. Now remember, with this one, we're taking out 5% of whatever the balance is that year, not a fixed dollar amount. Let's see what that does to the charts.
Whoa! Okay, 2 things pop out right away. First, look at that portfolio chart on the left. The failure rate? It dropped from 8 down to just 1. That is a massive improvement. But there's always a but, right? Look at the withdrawal chart on the right. It's not a flat line anymore. Your income now bounces around with the market, and you can see in some cases it actually dips below that starting 50,000. And that brings us to our final strategy, the most dynamic of the bunch, the variable withdrawal strategy. This one actually adjusts how much you take out based on how the market did last year.
So check this out. Just like the last one, only one failure out of 500 runs, so it's just as safe. But look at that income chart on the right. The median withdrawal, what the typical person gets, jumps to over $62,000 a year.
That's like giving yourself a massive pay raise in retirement. Now, the price you pay for that is even more volatility. Your income can swing around quite a bit. But look at the final balances on the left. They're all clustered much more tightly together. No huge leftover fortunes.
Okay, let's put it all side by side. This table really just makes the whole thing crystal clear. The fixed strategy, FWS, it has the lowest success rate, but you get that perfectly stable income. The other two, PPS and especially VWS, they crank up your success rate and your median income, but you give up that stability. And just look at that final balance range for VWS. It's so much smaller. It basically ensures you're not going to accidentally leave a massive unspent fortune on the table.
So after all that data, the big question is, what does this actually mean for you? Which of these paths is the right one?
When you get right down to it, it all boils down to one single crucial trade-off: stability versus potential. Are you willing to let your income bounce around a bit for the very real chance at a much wealthier retirement? Because on average, these variable strategies mean you get to spend more money. The only catch is, you have to be cool with some years being a little leaner than others.
And hey, remember that key detail from our simulation? We put a floor on those variable strategies. We programmed it so your income could never drop below 90% of what you started with, so never below $45,000. Having that safety net, well, it makes the whole idea of a variable income a lot less terrifying, doesn't it?
So let's go back to the beginning. Is the 4% rule dead? I'd say no. It's not dead. It's just been dethroned. It's no longer the only rule in town. Think of it now as the starting point, the baseline that you can use to compare these other, more dynamic, and let's be honest, probably more rewarding strategies.
And that leaves us with one final question. And this one isn't about spreadsheets or computer simulations. It's about you. What do you value more? Is the peace of mind that comes with a perfectly predictable paycheck worth potentially leaving millions of dollars on the table? Or are you willing to ride the waves of the market for a shot at a much, much wealthier retirement? That choice is all yours.